I think I started getting really serious about guitar, and probably when I was like 16 something, and like really practicing like a lot. And around that time too, I got really into punk rock. This Azalea Snail, I don't know if you ever heard of her. She's like a musician. She's done a lot of stuff out of New York, but we actually went to high school together, me and her. She was a year older than me, and I had just like, I was totally not into any of the music that was going on at the time, and then I heard like Patti Smith on the radio, and it was this big deal, and we kind of, me and Azalea kind of like bonded over the fact that we were the only two people in our high school who knew who Patti Smith was. But I was still like I didn't really know anything about punk. I think my brother had a New York Dolls record that I really, really liked, and but she was one of those kids that, sent away for CDs, and she had like the first X-Ray Specs single and stuff like that. So she really turned me on to a lot of great stuff and kind of made it a point to sort of educate me. Would just bring me over to her house and just play me tons of records, and then we had a little band together. Like I'd play guitar and she would sing. So that's when I started feeling like that's what I really wanted to do, or that's what I was really interested in. Well, I grew up in D.C., and actually, so around the time I was like in high school and stuff, I was really into the punk rock scene, and I had like a fake ID, and also at that time, like the drinking age in D.C. was 18, and the licenses actually didn't have photos on them. This was in like the late 70s, so we would like go down to D.C. and go to like all the punk rock clubs, and that's when I started seeing like, wow, I could do this, or I want to do this. And like I wasn't like the greatest guitar player in the world, but I could, me and Azalea had already messed around with writing songs and stuff. And she was like a couple years older than me, so she left town, and I guess it was after she left town, sort of punk scene was just starting in DC, like with In Your Ear Records, and Don Zantera already had a studio up and running, and there was some paper, and I can't even remember what it was called now, but I looked in some paper that reviewed, or fanzine, and there was an ad in there that they were looking for a guitar player, and I started kind of answering ads like for like guitar players, and ended up getting in this band that I'd actually had the single. It was a band there used to be a band called the Shirkers, and I actually had their single. It was on Stiff Records, and they were like a DC punk band. And they had a single, Drunk and Disorderly. And the singer from that and one of the other guys were forming like a new band. And so they took me on as a guitar player. And we were called the Fingers of Shame. And we never had any shows. But I got to go into a recording studio for the first time. And it's funny because the guy whose studio I went in, that was like probably like 78, 79, is now like the most famous, he did all the Minor Threat stuff, all the Fugazi stuff he's still doing. Don Zantera. I don't know if he's still got the same studio. It was like in his apartment. But I went in a recording. That was my first time in a recording studio, and it was a fucking disaster. Because I'd only been playing guitar for like a couple of years, and I really sucked, and my equipment was just horrendous. Do you know what I mean? Like a PV amp. I'd trade it with some girl in like high school, and it was and I'd never played before, I'd never recorded before. I had no idea what to expect, and I just remember like being like totally bummed out. Like there was another guitar player in the band who was much better than me, and I think they ended up actually recording over, it was just like, it was a humbling experience. When I got to Boston, I got exposed to a lot more. There was a lot of it was like punk rock, but there was a lot of art students doing it, so it was like this whole kind of different scene that was happening then, but it was a really, really good scene. It was like when Mission of Burma was starting and stuff. So, and starting, like punk had already ended pretty much, like the Sex Pistols had come and gone, and the Clash had put out Sandinista, which wasn't really, not saying that that's a bad record, but, like just kind of like that whole punk rock thing only lasted like a couple of years. Anyway, so I got in my first band in Boston. It was a band called White Women, and I got into it because this friend of mine was going to audition for him, and she, we were both really young, and she wanted her friend to come along for moral support, so I went to the audition with her, and they didn't have a drummer, but there was a drum set there, and they asked me, well, can you play drums? And I was like, well, I can keep a beat, because I'd kind of learned a little bit from just kind of playing, in high school and stuff, and so I ended up actually joining my first band as the drummer. But I was really into playing guitar, so I kind of like after like a month or so, I begged my way into like, playing guitar, and that band was called White Women, so I did that and started out with drums, and I was playing guitar, and then I ended up being like the lead singer, because the singer decided she wanted to play drums, so she was kind of like, she was a lot older than me, Dolores Paradise, and she was Lou Miami's wife. I don't know if you remember. Lou Miami's kind of sort of like big, like in that Boston scene at the time, and so I ended up being the lead singer, and I was starting to write some songs. So I wrote some songs, and then, so that was White Women, and then Dangerous Birds I formed. And then after that, Uzi, and then after that, Live Skull. And at the same time, kind of as Live Skull, I was doing this band called Via, which we didn't do too many shows, but we did a few, and they were really, really fun. And that's when actually Chris Brokop, that's when I met him, because he he had gone to high school with one of the guys that was in Via, this guy Jerry DiRienzo, and Chris actually played drums with Via on like a show we did in Boston right when the Middle East first opened. All right, so then Come. Hum had so many different members. Actually, not that many compared to other bands, but you know, I just decided that I didn't want to be. Still want to play with people. Like I enjoy playing like in a band, but I didn't want to like have to break up the band or like not be able to play those songs anymore. And so I just kind of decided to go under my own name, because everyone I was playing with at the time was sort of involved in different projects. But so that was like my quote unquote solo stuff, which I'm still doing now. But at this point, I pretty much like David Currie and Daniel Coughlin, like we're pretty much like a band. Like we've just finished like making our third record together, and well, actually fourth if you count this Return to Sender thing, and you know, and do a lot of touring together.
I left my brother and crossed the river.
Like at this point, me and Dave and Daniel have been playing together and touring together for like almost 3 years, and so I think the first couple of records were more just kind of like the song. I think the songs are a little less conventional because of that, because you know we're more comfortable with how we play together. Like there's like improvised sections and some of this, you know, a lot of the songs as opposed to just sort of verse, chorus, you know, whatever. I think we're experimenting a lot more. I mean, the first solo record, I think I really wanted to make a break from the stuff that Cum was doing, and so I was kind of like, I don't want any like guitar feedback on the record, like anywhere at any point, and like I just wanted it to be like, because I had played a lot of the songs at first on that first record with just a piano player, this woman Beth Heinberg that I was playing with a lot before I made the first record. I thought of those songs as more like piano-based songs and wanted to bring that out. And now I think like after like touring as a three-piece, you know, a lot, though Mel Letterman did do a bunch of From Victory at Sea. He plays on this record too, and he did a fair amount of touring with us up until about like a year ago or something. But most of the touring would be like as a three-piece, and so I'm learning to hear the songs that way and learning like kind of what we can do. I think that the songs are a little bit different, are definitely different from like the first solo one. And there's still real quiet stuff, but there's also some pretty loud stuff. And recording it was really interesting too, because the last couple of years, both me and Dave Currie have been recorded with this band called Molasses, which are out of Montreal, and that I met him through Dave. Dave met him, I think, on a Willard Grant tour or something, and they share some members with Godspeed, You Black Emperor, who own a studio up in Montreal, and that's where Molasses would always record their records. It was called Hotel to Tango, and so I'd been up there a couple of times recording with them, and just really loved the studio and loved the guy that was engineering it, this guy Howard Bylerman. And you know, I had talked to Howard before and said, you know, I'd love to come up here sometime and record some of my own stuff, and he was like, yeah, you should do that anytime. And you know, I asked him how much it was, and it was really reasonable, especially because it was, you know, Canadian and in Canadian money, so it was like actually cheaper than I could do it here for what it was. It's a really nice studio. It was all analog, 2-inch tape, and stuff. I actually didn't realize until I got up there that it was completely all analog. Like there was no, like you couldn't even bounce tracks onto like a DAT or something and then put it back on the tape. Like you really had to decide, you know, listen back to everything, you know, so you didn't use up, because we could only afford like 2 rolls of tape, so you didn't use up all the tape. But so when I just really wanted to go up there and record there, because I knew that definitely in terms of like guitar sounds and viola sounds, that it was just a really nice sounding place. So I'd asked him, I think it was, you know, kind of been in the back of my head for a while, and then when I talked to Thrill Jockey and they said they were interested in putting out this record and, you know, and helping me record it, like that was the first place I thought of, and it ended up working out, luckily, because that studio actually is really busy. But I think all the Godspeed guys and Silver Mount Zion and everyone happened to be on tour at that time, and like there's like 3 people, I think only 3 people who own it, and 2 of them are in Godspeed You Black Emperor, so I think they were on tour at the time. Consequently, there was a fair amount of space in the studio for Howard to slip us in. So. Boston, actually. I go through different phases with Boston, and in the last couple of years I've actually been like, I really like living here. And people ask me all the time, I mean, when I do interviews, a lot of times people say, why do you live in Boston? You know, and it's kind of like, well, I don't know how many other cities you visited in the States. I visit a lot of them, and there's a couple other places that I would rather live, but it's definitely one of the best cities, I think, I like it. love going to Spain, and we've done a lot of stuff there, and that started with Cum, really, because that was sort of like a Cum legacy. Cum did a bunch of stuff in Spain, and we filmed this movie over there, and ended up being there for like a month and a half. This movie called Radiation. It's a movie that Mike Galinsky and Suki Holly put out. They did a movie called Half Cocked, too, that maybe you'd heard of, and they've done a couple of other movies. This new one about the guy that wrote the biography of President Bush, who ended up committing suicide. I can't. It's called. The name of it is slipping my mind right now. It's a really good movie. Anyway, sorry. You've probably seen it out. I want to say like it's called like The Lion and the something and the something that. But anyway, so Suki Holly and Mike Galinsky brought us over there. We had been there a couple of times, and Cum had been there. Actually, no, just once before. We did like 3 shows, and unbeknownst to us, I guess people were talking about it for like a couple years afterwards, you know, and we went back there that time, and when we did the movie, and we were there for like a month and a half, and we were traveling as part of a film festival, and it was crazy, like, because Mike and Suki wanted to make a movie in Spain, and the movie was about this guy Unai, who in real life was a rock promoter in Spain. So they needed a band in the movie. The movie wasn't about Cum, but there was a part in it for a band that kind of like sets up the whole scenario for the rest of the film about an American band. So we were the American band, and then also to kind of get help with funding and to get access, they couldn't afford to like, you know, get permits to film. They set up this thing, a Spanish-American movie festival, which was traveling with Cum, which actually I don't think they ended up getting any Spanish films, so it was just like a bunch of American films, like there was Half Cocked, and there was like a bunch of other stuff about they were all about music. And so we would travel like in this van with a projector, with the reels of film, like get into these gigs, and then they'd be like, okay, you know, your sound check is from like 4 to 7. Sound check would never happen. Like the entire film crew, you know, which wasn't that big, but they'd sort of descend on the club and immediately start shooting a scene. Like the club owners would be like, you know, what's going on? You know, like without permission, and be shooting like at the club the whole time. So we were kind of like their decoy to like be able to shoot their movie in all these different clubs, and it was really fun. We met a lot of people there, and played all over Spain, and ever since then, like I've been going back there like a lot, and I've done a lot of stuff there with like with the solo stuff, done a lot of tours over there, played some pretty big festivals, and I've been on like TV there, like on their national television, like their kind of sort of a combination of MTV and Austin City Limits type thing, and made some good friends over there. So Spain is pretty special to me. And actually, the last record that I did with Kim Chi was licensed by this guy Jesus Lorente, this Spanish label Aquarela.
Too many people just one. And after a while I can't bring myself to say it. Be sure you notice always what you're eating. Be sure you notice always what you're eating. New York night, 1926, it all looked different. You starved your telephones, now your servants can't bring you messages.
I haven't done the big cross-country tour with this lineup yet. A big part of the reason is that I don't have a van. So, like, I had the cum van. We used to call it the cum bucket. And that finally, like, died. It was a great van, you know. But I never like, got another one. And so it just hasn't been, like, worth it to... It's just been cheaper to, like, sort of fly out to the West Coast and rent a car. And, you know, we don't have, like, the huge amplifiers anymore and, like, what I'm doing now. So so I haven't done, like, that much stuff in terms of big tours in the States. And in Europe we have, just because we'll get there. But yeah, I guess I'm guilty of, like, and I was like, well, why do those shows, you know, in Nebraska and Kansas and St. Louis? Why not just fly straight to, you know, so you can get to, like, Seattle or something? Why not just fly straight to Seattle? Not that I mean, I've had great times playing in those places, but it just, like, financially, like, you know, I don't feel like we have, like, the support, you know, the audience support to make that kind of stuff worthwhile. So I guess we've done less touring in the States.
Straight to my face. Thank you very much. 33 on the honor. David Currie on the violin. Daniel Calvin on the drums. Thalia, thanks.